Welcome to part 3 of our series, Leading Well in Our Homes. In our first session, we laid the foundations and answered the question, why are our homes so important in ministry? In our second session, we answered some of the more practical aspects of how do we build health and strength into our homes. And we established that we need to have a vision, a biblical vision of how God wants our homes and marriages to look like. We need to build biblically out of an understanding of headship and servanthood within the home, that we can pray together, we can learn one another's love language, learn to play together, and then finally watch our words to be builder-uppers and not tearer-downers. In this final session, we'll answer that question of how do we protect our homes and honour our children. The first way we protect our homes is to establish clear boundaries, protecting the borders of our homes. In Australia recently, it was made illegal to have puppies in the front window of pet shops because they discovered that it was so unhealthy for the puppies to live in public view. People who could come up at any time, tap on the glass, and people who could wander around and pat them from behind. And it was made illegal because it just wasn't healthy for those puppies. You know, the same principle can apply in ministry families. If we are not careful, our families can be traumatized, our families can be ill-affected by people who don't mean any harm, but who present themselves and step into the boundary of our families, sometimes uninvited. They can be the drop-ins, the hang-arounds, the invite-outs, the phone calls, the emailers, the SMSs, whatever means they use. And all of those things are part of life, but we must understand we have to control who has access to our home and when. Because the challenge is that our marriages and our families' time will be stolen unless we control it. The solution is creating those boundaries, learning to say no. Just because they come to your door doesn't mean that they come into your house. Just because they know your phone number doesn't mean that you answer the phone. Just because you don't have anything planned doesn't mean that you're free. And we need to be ruthless with protecting our time and protecting our homes. Because if we don't, as I said, it will always be invaded and our time will be taken. Jesus was a good example of this. Sometimes we get conflicted. Is it right to say no? Well, the truth is Jesus set the example. Luke chapter 5 verse 15 said, the news about him spread all the more so that crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places and prayed. Can I encourage you? Learn for your family's sake to say no to the crowd, no to busyness, so that you can nurture your home and protect your children. Number 2, always keep the garbage outside the home. If somebody came to you, knocked on the front door and said, look, do you mind if I just empty my bin in your house, right here in your front door? You would be aghast. You would tell them, no, of course, take your rubbish somewhere else. I don't want your rubbish in my home. Well, the truth is that sometimes, if we're not careful, we can do the same thing, bring home the troubles of the church or the troubles of ministry into our home. Now, I'm not saying that sometimes you don't need to have an honest conversation with your spouse, but we've got to be so careful that we don't bring home the negatives that creates a negative atmosphere within our home. That number 1 can affect our spouse, number 2 can affect our children, number 3 affect the entire atmosphere of the home. And it's so easy to do. It's so easy to bring home a critical spirit. It's so easy to bring home an unresolved issue, but we need to be so disciplined that in the environment of our home, particularly when our children are around about, that we speak only of the positives. We speak only of the good things that are going on, so that our children are raised in an environment where they learn to love church, where they learn to understand that it's an honor to love people, to lead people, to be called into ministry. And that means there'll be times when you need to put the filter on. Times when you need to step up and say, hey, let's not talk about that now. Let's not talk about that person in that way. Let's not talk about that issue. Let's put that aside and let's talk about the good things of God. Create an atmosphere at home that is always positive, that is always healthy, never critical, never pulling down. And make sure that in the home, the ones that you do allow into your home, that they're great relationships. They're positive role models, people who love your children, people who honor the home and respect the home. Invite those people in. Develop healthy relationships, again, that your children can see that the church is full of wonderful people. Number 3, how do we protect our homes and honor our children? Make sure that our children in particular always know they are more important to you than the church or the ministry that you're involved in. You know, the sad truth is that sometimes we can get so busy because we are so committed and so passionate that we end up neglecting our children. There used to be a mentality that said, well, if I honor God, God will honor my children. But the reality is there are things that God expects us to do that He won't do for us. And that is to be present with our children. We have to make sure that our children know their priorities. Yes, there are times when we'll be busy. There'll be times when we wish we could be, but we can't be there with them. But they must know there's never ultimately a conflict in where our hearts ultimately lies. We must not build the PK syndrome of neglected kids who end up resenting the church and resenting ministry. We must do the opposite, that the PK syndrome of our home is that our children love God. Our children know that they are loved by a mum and dad, and they know where they sit in the priorities of our lives, that they are our treasures, and we love them and understand that in their world, love is spent Time. I don't want to just provide for my children's needs. I don't want to just give them a good education, nice clothes and fun. I want to be with them on the journey. I want to spend time. And so as mum and dad, ask yourselves a question. How do we set aside that time? What are the special moments that you can create? When you take them to church, do they understand that the church is fun? When you introduce them to people, do they understand how great these people are? When you're not in church at home, do they know that they've got time with you? One of the best things I ever did was take my children on daddy-daughter dates and daddy-son dates, where out of all of our 5 children, I'd spend time with one child, and did it on a rotating basis. Did it through every age, every season, because they knew that there was a time coming in that week where they would have time with dad. Make sure you set into your calendar family times, individual times, and make sure that you catch those special unscheduled times where that child wants to lean into you. Because the truth is, we can't always schedule the most special moments. We just need to be sensitive when the children's hearts are open and they're hungry and they just want to be with mum and dad. So I hope that these sessions have helped you. I hope that you understand how important, how much God wants to bless our marriages and bless our homes. I pray that you've learned a few hints, a few tricks, a few habits that you can put into your marriage and put into your home to make sure that strength. And I pray that when you look at your children, that you look at ways that you can protect the environment of your home, and that you can always let them know that they are loved and cherished. You see, God does want to bless our homes. Our homes don't have to be in competition with ministry. We can have a happy home, a healthy home, a flourishing home, and an incredibly successful ministry. But it will not happen by chance. It will only happen as we step up, step in, and do the things that God asks us to do.